Welcome to RGV On the Rise, a limited series podcast about the economy and opportunities of Hidalgo County, the Rio Grande Valley, and South Texas. Please say hello to today's guest.
Welcome, Hidalgo County District Clerk Laura Hinojosa, whose offices provide a variety of services for residents and who oversees that very mystical process called jury duty, which we'll be getting into in a second. But before we do that, I'd like to get an overview from you regarding what services your offices do provide.
Of course. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here, Carlos. As the district clerk for Hidalgo County, my office is actually the official record keeper of all of the civil, family, and felony records associated with people's cases. We also assist in obtaining timely dispositions with all of the courts on the filings that are done. We help with passports also, which I'm very proud of. We take appointments for passports Monday through Friday from 9 to 3, so we are here to help with that. We also oversee the registry of the court. And the registry of the court is where the monies are kept, basically.
Okay.
If there's some minor funds, if there's a child that's, say, in a car accident or something, and there are funds, we hold those till the child turns 18 and comes and gets an official court order to release those funds.
All right. So a lot of your interaction with the public entails the functions of the judiciary.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Which leads us to jury duty. And let's begin by understanding how many people a year typically are called for jury duty?
We actually, in 2024, had over 139,000 people called. And so we summons all of those people. That doesn't mean they all come in. Sometimes there's exemptions. Sometimes there's disqualifications. Periodically, a summons doesn't get to somebody's home based on a wrong address, although we do use a third-party vendor to check those addresses. So we feel like we have a pretty good return on our investment.
Good. And what's the process for choosing potential jurors?
So the process is really followed by statute.
Okay.
It's not something that we just decide to do one day. We follow what the statute says. So upon arrival, jurors are directed to the auditorium. And at that time, we have staff there who can help to make sure that they have already, that the potential juror has already gone on to e-juror and answered all of the questions that are required on the summons. If they haven't, then they come to our office and we have people there to help them fill that information out. They're then directed back to the auditorium. My staff and I can actually help with disqualifications, which you can do on your own. You don't have to come to the courtroom for that, to the auditorium for that. You can go on to e-juror and you can disqualify yourself, or based on what the statute says, or you can reschedule yourself once per year. Otherwise, you need to come in and the judge will have to excuse you. So there are certain disqualifications and certain exemptions.
Now, where do you draw your pool of names?
We get our pool of names from the Secretary of State, from elections, and from DPS. We reconstitute our wheel once a year so that we can get the best information possible. But again, that's based on the information that the potential jurors have given to the elections department or to DPS when they get their driver's license.
So you say you reconstitute the wheel. So is it like a random kind of drawing of names, or how does that work?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Every week we pull 2 pools on Monday and 2 pools on Tuesday. And so, yes, it's totally random.
Electronic, I'm assuming.
Yes.
It's not like a big ball or something.
No, not at all. It's totally done electronically.
Okay.
And we have a jury plan which discusses the entire process that can be found online.
So an individual in Hidalgo County receives a jury summons. What is the first thing you advise that person to do?
The first thing I would advise them to do is to open that summons and check out the date and time that they need to appear. We send our summons out 3 weeks in advance. So people have time to figure out their calendar, figure out what's going on at work, if they need to call for a sub, if they, what they need to do. They then can read what the disqualifications and the exemptions are. If they qualify for one of those disqualifications, say, for example, they have a child under 12 years old and there's nobody to take care of them, they can go on to eJuror. They can click on that disqualification, sign. Under penalty of perjury, they're signing that they do have a child at home that needs care, and they can disqualify themselves. They can also call. If maybe they don't have a computer at home, maybe their internet's down, and so they can always call the office and we can help them. Now, if they wait till the last minute, the system locks down 1 week before.
Okay.
So they have 2 weeks to respond on their own.
Can you tell me the distinction between exemptions and disqualification?
So only a district judge can exempt you.
Okay.
But there are some disqualifications that you can do. So that's not something my staff and I can help people if they come in and they say they didn't understand how, to do that. But it's pretty basic on the summons. It does explain, but we're here to serve, so we can help anybody if they don't understand.
Now, there must be a million reasons for people giving to either want to serve on a jury or avoid jury service. I'm just wondering, what are some of the typical reasons?
Typically, I would say that the biggest reason is work. And regrettably, a work excuse is not a qualifying disqualification or exemption, but you cannot be fired for serving on a jury.
So there are protections.
There are definitely protections, and they're federal protections.
Oh, wow. I asked typical reasons. What are some of the more unusual reasons that you've heard?
Regrettably, there are some people who just don't believe in the judicial system. And although they will talk to us about that, we always tell them that they need to come in and speak with the judge, because that's not a reason not to show up. There are some people who have religious reasons who cannot judge. And so that's something that also is, a little different. We don't typically hear that, but there are some people who could bust a whole trial if at the end of a trial they say that their religion does not allow them to judge another man.
Okay.
And in the 18 years that we've been here, that happened once, back in 2009.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. So something that I'm seeing much more in what we call the sandwich generation is you have a child under 12, you can avoid jury service.
Sure.
What if you're caring for the elderly? Is there something that...
So there is an exemption for that if you are not a medical provider. If that is part of your job, then that's not an excuse.
Okay.
But if it is a family member, then you can claim that disqualification. Definitely. Sometimes we have people who have travel plans. They plan something 6 months in advance, 3 months in advance. Again, we send our summons out 3 weeks in advance. So what we do is we ask for them to please bring in their itinerary, and we'll present that to the judge for them, or they can present that on the day of their summons. And our judges in Hidalgo County are very kind.
So 3 weeks out, you get a summons. You're hoping to have that form, the e-jury form, filled out.
Yes, sir.
You give them about 2 weeks.
Yes, sir.
The day arrives. You show up for jury duty. What should one expect upon arriving at jury duty?
So you should expect to be very cold and dress in layers. Although it's 100 degrees outside, it might be 55 degrees in the auditorium or in the courtrooms. You might expect to actually wait a little while. First, we go through the process telling jurors what to expect, and then they are in the auditorium when the judge comes to impanel. The judge comes to impanel, as mentioned before. The judge has to hear excuses, and depending on how many people have an excuse kind of determines that time. And while all of that is going on, we've got criminal defendants up in court who might be willing to take a plea. It's really interesting how when you hold someone's feet to the fire, sometimes things change.
They change their mind.
They change their mind. Maybe that's a civil case that's going to get, people come together all of a sudden when they know that there is a jury waiting to make a determination. So there's settlements going on. There's so many things happening behind the scenes that people in the auditorium don't know about.
Now, are there certain days of the week that are reserved for jury duty?
Yes, Mondays and Tuesdays.
Mondays and Tuesdays.
Yes.
And when do you know that a judge is needing to impanel a jury? How does that work?
So the courts request their panels some weeks in advance, some months in advance, some actually a couple of days. And we follow the statute as far as which courts get chosen. They get chosen. There's a criminal case takes precedence over a civil case or a family case. A criminal case where the defendant is in jail takes precedence over somebody who's out of jail. And if the victim is under 14 years old, that takes precedence.
Again, something behind the scenes that most jurors or potential jurors aren't even aware of.
Right.
Okay. And it's determinant on that day whether you're going civil, criminal, or is it whoever's got the next case on the docket?
So every week, this was last week's, for example. So we have kind of a docket that we follow with regards to what to expect for that day. And all of the courts are aware. All of the courts are aware, whether they're district courts, county courts. We even impanel for JPs. So they know what's going on. I truly believe communicating and being as transparent as possible just helps the whole process move more smoothly.
And so your jury days are Mondays and Tuesdays. Is it typically for impanelment?
Yeah.
Is it typically all day, or do you expect?
So we have one group that comes in the morning, one group that comes in the afternoon. We have certain courts that will start trial that day. We have others that will start the next day. We have other courts that will start on Friday. Maybe somebody was impaneled on Monday. They're allowed to go home for the, Tuesday through Thursday. They come back on Friday. So it just depends on the court, really. There's not a set, if you come Monday, you have to come back Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay.
Each court has their own process. I know that I'm going to call you to come in Monday or Tuesday, either in the morning or in the afternoon. Once you are impaneled and you are assigned to a court, then my office really doesn't have much to do with you after that, short of if you need an excuse for work, you would come to our office. We get reports from the courts. Those are then verified by our office and sent to the treasurer, and checks are then sent out from the treasurer's office, not from my office. One thing I would like to remind everybody about is that when you do get your check, those checks are only good for 90 days. On the 91st day, that check is then stale, and statutorily, we cannot reissue a check. Okay. So if a juror does not cash that check within 90 days, the juror loses the money, and the money actually goes back to the county. And if they take anything away from this, if they're ever chosen as a juror, please cash your check within 90 days, especially a younger generation who doesn't use checks. They really don't use checks, and they don't realize that a check could go stale. So that's very important.
Well, you stole my thunder. I was going to ask if jurors got paid.
Yes, they do. They do.
How much? What is
so it's $20 for the first day and $58 for every day thereafter.
Okay. And what happens if I'm summoned and I decide just not to show up?
So that's not good, because your name then is presented to the judges on a failure to appear list. And in addition to the fact that we keep your history as to how many times you've been summoned, how many times you've appeared, how many times you have not appeared. You also take the chance of receiving a fine or a fee. There is, going back to your summons, there is a warning right here that tells you what can happen. You must, under penalty of law, answer the summons in person at the respective time and date. The law provides a fine of $100 to $1,000 for being late or failing to appear.
Can a person serve on a jury with either a misdemeanor or a felony on his or her record?
A convicted felon cannot.
Okay.
However, people with misdemeanors can, unless it's a misdemeanor theft. If you have a misdemeanor theft on your record, you cannot serve on a jury, because that goes against basically how you think and your morals. And so no,
Interesting.
you can't.
One thing we're hearing a lot about is the potential for scamming potential jurors. How does that work?
Yes. So we have seen, especially over the summer, that people receive phone calls saying that there's a warrant for their arrest because they have not come to jury service, or they did not respond to their summons. They really prey on the elderly. They just prey on people. And they will tell you that there is a warrant for your arrest because you didn't show up to jury. And nobody's going to call you if there's a warrant for your arrest for anything. If there's a warrant for your arrest, that's kind of a secret and you're going to get picked up. So nobody's going to call and say, hey, there's a warrant, but you can pay this online. You can go buy a gift card. That's not going to happen. That is not going to happen at all. If it does happen, we ask that you call your local municipality and report that to your local PD. And if you live outside of the city limits, then you need to call the sheriff and let the sheriff know that you received this phone call. If there's any data that you can share with the investigators, they actually have caught some scammers.
Now, one thing I understand to help raise the awareness of jury service is something called Jury Appreciation Week. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, that's a really fun time. And lucky if you get picked to come during that week, because we work with the community and we have little giveaways. We have our judges who are fighting to empanel during that week, because it's a really fun time. I wish we could do it all year long, but our community is so giving in Hidalgo County, and my staff and I go out and request little giveaways in appreciation of people giving their time. So next week is going to be a fun time at jury empanelment.
Any closing thoughts?
In closing, I want people to know how important it is for them to come and serve. I want them to think about the fact that if they were unjustly accused, wouldn't they want somebody as smart as them serving on a jury? Wouldn't they want the people around them on the jury panel helping them make the decisions on somebody's innocence or guilt? Be good people. And we have good people, smart people in Hidalgo County. We need them here. We need them coming to jury duty. We need them serving. We have people on the front lines all over the world, and they are out there dying to protect our freedoms. The least we can do is help by serving on a jury.
Hidalgo County District Clerk Laura Hinojosa, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
In our next episode, as Hidalgo County continues to deal with a large stray animal population, the Animal Welfare Alliance tells us what they are doing and what we as a community can do to help our furry friends. Join us on May 14th for episode 8 of season 2 of RGV on the Rise.